Hello from the brutal capitalist dictatorship of Kuala Lumpur. I hope you're having an amazing day, because if you're having an amazing day, I'm having an amazing day. And if I'm having an amazing day, you too should be having an amazing day. Alright, strictly speaking, we're not exactly in Kuala Lumpur, guys. We're actually back in the Malaysian rainforest. It's been a while since I've done a jungle video, yeah? I like the jungle because it's quiet, it's peaceful, and you get some respite from the brutal capitalist dictatorship that is modern Malaysia. So yes, enjoy this next jungle video. And do subscribe to my channel, guys. It's only a single click, right? You know, I think that's hardly anything compared to the effort, the struggle that I put in to producing these videos for you guys. Yeah, I had to drive an hour to get here. Yeah, so do appreciate my effort and actually do click subscribe. Thank you very much. Okay, let's look at this tree here. It says here, amaran, hati-hati ular berbisa di kawasan ini. Well, that basically means warning, be careful of poisonous snakes in this area. So we've got to be very careful, yeah, because there are poisonous snakes in the Malayan jungles. Although frankly, you'll see by the end of this video that the most dangerous snakes in the world are not in this jungle. No, they're on social media. Just imagine 70 years ago, the likes of Chin Peng, Abdullah Sidi and Rashid Maidin were trawling around these jungles, struggling against capitalism like we do, yeah? Yes, and except that they were doing it with semi-automatic weapons, you see. The only weapon I've got really is my digital phone. That's the only weapon I've got. Those guys actually had semi-automatic weapons, which makes a world of difference, yeah? So last year, there was a historical epic film entitled Mat Kilau, which is basically supposed to be a fictionalized account of Mat Kilau, one of our local heroes, right? One of our local anti-imperialist heroes who rebelled against the British, right? And many Malaysians were very excited for that movie. I too was excited for that movie, right? Because, you know, I'm all for anything that's anti-imperialism. You can see in my Twitter profile, I'm anti-fascist, anti-imperialist. But I also held, well, certain reservations about that movie. You know, as did many of my fellow Malaysian Chinese and Malaysian Indians as well. Because due to the polarizing racial politics in our country, and the fact that our politicians of all races are always race baiting and trying to divide us, the Malaysian working class, among each other, or, you know, I was a bit, you can't really blame me for being a little bit nervous about that movie, about the dynamics of that movie, right? And as it turned out, you know, that movie, rather than being an anti-imperialist movie, turned out to be one of those basically race hustling movies, you know, in which it's basically one race against all the other races. That is the Malay race against all the other races. Now, was that movie a bad movie in terms of action scenes and storyline? No, it wasn't. Okay, the action scenes were fairly good. Storyline was fast-paced and entertaining even, but the dynamics were a little bit disturbing. And I will link to you another article written by my friend Terence Aaron. Basically, it's not exactly an article, but yeah, it is sort of an article. But he basically, the title of the article is Mat Kilau is a fascist film, right? I'm not sure if I would label it fascist, but nevertheless, it's an interesting read, right? But make no mistake, the ethno-nationalist connotations were as clear as day in that movie, which portrayed not only the British as being cruel, but also the Chinese and Indians, who were historical victims of imperialism, as being just as cruel as the white man, right? So basically, it was basically the rationale of that movie, according to the producers and the defenders of that movie, was because they wanted to basically inspire a sense of unity among the Malay people so that they don't get colonized again, right? But at the same time, not only the white man, but also the Chinese and the Indians were also demonized, not just as victims of colonialism, but also as, you know, uh, extensions of the colonizer, right? And I was right. As it turns out, that movie was not actually anti-imperialist, but rather it was ethno-nationalist, and basically meant to serve a very divisive political function, right? So today's video is not really on that movie. I'm not actually going to be talking about that movie because I'd rather just let, old news be old news and not focus on that movie. But today's video is going to be entitled The Racial Unity to Fascism Pipeline. Basically, how people unintentionally, when they push for racial unity, they end up basically going down the path of fascism. And it may be a short video as it looks like it's about to rain. So I'm sure you've heard of this Reddit group called AZN Identity, which is supposed to be a group online for Asian people in order to promote Asian pride and basically fight back against the racism that Asians in the world face, right? Which is all, a noble cause. Basically, I'm not saying that's not a noble cause, right? I too was a frequent viewer of this site. I wouldn't say I was a contributor, but rather a viewer, because from my point of view, this is just my point of view, AZN Identity tended to have a very, very American-centric sort of slant, right? It didn't really represent the point of view or the interests of Asians around the world, right? Like Asians in Asia. But, Asians in Asia would occasionally come on AZN Identity and still basically put in their 2 cents, right? Now, first of all, I have to say that, unity is forged not only as a result of shared beliefs, right, but of shared historic circumstances, right? So it's understandable that, people who have faced discrimination, who have faced racism, and have faced Orientalism would get together, and unite against a common enemy, right? But over time, I began to realize that, these groups seemed, with due respect to the more moderate members on these groups, seemed to have a bit of an extremist element in them. And that some of their members were really no different from the sort of guys you would meet on 4chan, if they would be exactly the same as those guys you meet on 4chan if they were white. If you've been in these spaces long enough, you'll notice that they use certain types of jargon terminology that the layman may not be aware of. For example, they may call a self-hating Asian man a Chan, and a self-hating Asian woman a Lu, And while there are certainly self-hating people of color in this world, and I've talked about it time and again, the fact of the matter is that oftentimes these groups will label anyone who does not fit their rigid purity tests as a Chan or a Lu, right? And not only that, you'll often see a common acronym that keeps cropping up in these groups is basically WMAF, which basically means white male Asian female, right? Because it seems to be unanimously agreed upon by most people on this group that white male Asian female is generally a dirty thing, right? And while there are, my sympathies do lie with the men of this group, you know, who face racism by white men with Asian wives. And I've called out these white men with Asian wives who are racist against Asian men and chauvinistic about Western culture. I've called them out time and again. The fact of the matter is that all white men with Asian wives get assumed to be guilty or until proven otherwise, right? And all friends of white men who happen to have Asian wives are also assumed to be guilty until proven otherwise, right? And these groups often have what you would describe of as a hive mind, right? You know, white men with Asian wives are assumed to be Orientalists and, you know, evil reactionaries until they have proven otherwise. Or, you know, Asians, you know, who are too westernized, so to speak, by their own arbitrary standards, are also to be held with suspicion until proven otherwise. And basically, these people tend to view the world in a very, very black and white manner, aka East is good, West is bad, right? But the problem with that is that, well, they were happy to cheer me on when I was calling out Western chauvinism, Western imperialism, which I still do, by the way, and basically racism by whites against people of color, specifically Asians, right? But whenever anything I say happens to go against their narrative, when I show the dark side of Asian society and I show the world the part of Asian society that, you know, isn't very nice. For example, the bullying and ostracization of people who don't fit within the collective Asian mold, right? Such as, for example, you know, Asians who can't speak their native language. I've talked about this. You can check out my video on bananas, langsats, and coconuts, and why we're often also viewed with suspicion in Asia because we don't happen to speak our so-called mother tongue, and sometimes even treated with hostility. Well, these so-called Asian activists who say that they defer to the Asian point of view will basically turn on you like a pack of wolves. And they turn on you like a pack of wolves, and they basically say things like, you must be a Chan, you must be a Lu, you must be mentally colonized, just because you point out certain inconvenient facts about Asian society and portray it as anything less than a utopia. Even though these people live in America, they don't live in Asia, they don't deal with the issues that Asians in Asia do, like religious extremism, tribalism, you know, bigotry against Asians who don't fit the mold of their culture. Like, for example, myself, who is not Chinese enough for some Chinese extremists in my country because I can't speak any Mandarin or any dialect, you know, who's treated like a race traitor. Or perhaps, you know, if you're a Malay or an Indian who doesn't speak Malay or Tamil, you're also treated by a race traitor by the ultras in that in those respective communities. When you bring up these issues, these inconvenient facts about the dark side of Asian society, or perhaps if you're not basically seen as one of them, for example, in an Asian society, there is an unhealthy trend of ostracizing people who are different, who don't fit the mold, right? That's the dark side of collectivism. When you bring up these unhealthy trends in Asian society and you try to make Asian society better, you try to improve your society, because that's what everyone who loves their society and their civilization should do, right? These so-called anti-imperialists, these so-called pro-Asian people will turn on you, as I've said, like a pack of wolves, and they'll call you all sorts of nasty names. You know, I've been called things, you know, by this Korean-American fellow called Douglas Kim. He's a Korean-American fascist, basically, who basically not only describes white men with Asian women as having a mind virus, or Asian women who go out with white men as having a mind virus, using the exact same terminology that these alt-writers in the American red pill use when talking about Asian women who don't fit his mold. He called me a used condom. Yeah, because I had a civilized conversation with Drew Pavlou. Let's get one thing straight, yeah? I'm not Drew Pavlou's friend, right? But he was the one who approached me first and was willing to have a civilized conversation with me. Yeah, let's just assume for the sake of argument that he's a fascist, okay? Let's just assume. At least, he was not the one calling me all sorts of nasty names and basically going around telling everyone that I was an enemy of the Asian community and I was not to be trusted, you know? Unlike these so-called AZN identity activists, right? Because when it comes down to it, you realize that their activism has no place not only for non-Asians, but also for Asians who do not fit their very specific narrative. But besides the fact that some of these right-wing Asian Americans are angry because I basically show the dark side of Asian society that they don't like, the fact of the matter is that another reason they're angry with me is because they just can't take criticism of Asian society, because they view the world in terms of viewing a ball game, right? Like Team East is good, Team West is bad, basically. So any criticism of Asian society, any sort of critique on Asian society, whether it be religious extremism or cultural extremism or ostracization of marginalized people or basically anything like that, is considered a personal attack on them. You see what I mean? And they go like, oh, you are a disgrace to your Asian race. Oh, you are mentally colonized. You are a race traitor. Yeah, as if my views are supposed to be representative of all the Asian people's views. But basically, what I find very ironic is that despite being pro-Asian, they have this really bizarre gatekeeping sort of proclivity, which means that, they go around saying that, oh, there are real Asians and there are fake Asians. The real Asians are people like us, while the fake Asians are people like Comrade Confucius or Timmy Hayes. Don't listen to those people, Like, who the fuck made you the global representative of the global Asian community? And what the fuck is a real Asian? Okay? Asians, there are billions and billions of Asian people in the world, right? Now, every Asian has different lived experiences in Asian society. And has it ever occurred to you that people like Joshua Wong, for example, might not have had a positive lived experience in Asian society? You ever stop to reflect that perhaps, the child who is not loved by the village, as goes an African proverb, will burn it down to feel its warmth? Have you ever thought that maybe the people that you term Uncle Chans or Auntie Lus, the self-haters, and by the way, I'm not a self-hater, yeah? I'm not one of those self-haters. I'm just saying that, I don't sugarcoat the dark side of Asian society, but have you ever considered that maybe the self-haters might be self-haters because the people in their society don't even treat them nicely? Huh? Has it ever occurred to you that maybe, just maybe, the extremists in Asian society might be creating more Uncle Chans and Auntie Lus? Have you ever bothered self-criticizing? No, because to them, everything that Asians like them do is good and holy. And basically, if you attack any part of Asian society, any regressive aspects of Asian society, you too must be a self-hater, right? And I find it really rich. I find it really rich that these people in America who have nothing to do with the social issues that Malaysians like myself are trying to deal with, right, will butt in and throw in their asinine opinions and call me a self-hating Asian, right? Because I'm trying to deal with the social issues in my own country. And I never asked for your opinion either, right? It's really rich that an American who lives miles away, has never set foot in Malaysia, would presume to know what basically the social issues I'm talking about are, right? And presume to know more about Asia than an Asian, right? Because that Asian doesn't happen to fit their narrative of Asia being this perfect utopia where everyone's nice to each other and basically, everyone's civil to each other, and the West as being this absolutely hopeless shithole that has no hope for the future. Basically, that's I not only don't fit their mold, but also at best, sometimes I've seen that they can be quite condescending. Like, for example, people on these Asian activist groups may say that, oh, white men in Asia are only teaching English because, they can't do anything else, as if teaching English is an easy profession, right? And that is a very American-centric point of view, by the way, because believe me, I've worked in the corporate world before, but after entering the classroom, after becoming a teacher, I've realized now that teaching English is not an easy profession. Teaching any subject is not an easy profession, right? And basically, I've come to realize now that teachers are the unsung heroes in our society. These people have an extremely American-centric view in that they don't respect teachers, because even though teachers are the most respected class in Eastern societies, right? And so when I said that, hey, I feel disrespected when you say that white men are only teaching English in Asia, because these useless white men are only teaching English in Asia because that's the only thing they can do. Because it seems to insinuate that if you're an English teacher, that means you're just a useless incompetent who can't do anything else with his life, right? Despite the fact that my grandmother was also an English teacher, right? Then these condescending people went and said, oh, this is why the Asian American diaspora's point of view is important, you see, because you don't really know what Western people are like. What makes you think that Asians in Asia are stupid or ignorant or less informed of the world or worldly wise than you are? What makes you think that as an Asian brought up in America, that you know more about the world than an Asian in Asia does? And I can tell you for a fact that not every white man in Asia is a sexpat, first of all. Second of all, I happen to have very good friends who happen to have Asian wives, right? Who happen to be white. And I don't appreciate them being thrown in with the sexpat category. And third of all, when you disrespect ESL teachers, you're also disrespecting the ESL teachers who happen to be of Asian descent, right? Do you ever think of that? No, because you're too stuck in your model minority mindset. You have this rigid fixation that, Asians must either be doctors, lawyers, businessmen, dentists, engineers, but they cannot be teachers. I mean, Asians must either be businessmen, doctors, lawyers, dentists, whatever, but they cannot be teachers because that doesn't fit your rigid model minority mold, right? It doesn't fit your rigid elitist model minority mold, does it? And look, do white people who come to Asia become the labor aristocracy? Yes, they absolutely do, right? I would know because I have friends in the HR department as well, okay? Yes, white people do earn more than their Asian counterparts, granted, right? But that's basically the fault of the Asian capitalists who place a higher value on these white people rather than the white people who are simply taking advantage of this opportunity. You understand, right? Whose fault is it? Who are you going to blame? The white worker who wants a better standard of living, who doesn't mind becoming the labor aristocracy in Asia? Or are you going to blame the Asian who throws other Asians under the bus in favor of this white worker? Who are you going to blame? You see? So, no. Just because you're an expat in Asia, it doesn't mean that you're a sexpat, and it doesn't mean that you're an immoral person. People come here for a variety of reasons, right? And second of all, just because an Asian happens to speak with a Western accent, right, it doesn't mean that that person is mentally colonized. You know, I'll show you Exhibit B. Take a look at this fellow here. Now, Exhibit B, this Bobby Lowe character claims that, you know, anglicized Chinese are the worst, right? He claims that, you know, that accent basically makes a Chinese mentally colonized. But here's a fun fact. Bobby doesn't sound like a Chinese name either, right? Have you ever heard of a Chinese man from the Tang Dynasty calling himself Bobby? Have you ever seen a Chinese man from the Tang Dynasty wearing a Western suit? So it's just the height of hypocrisy to call me mentally colonized because I don't happen to speak with a Chinesey accent. It's extremely Orientalist as well to expect Asians to sound like Uncle Roger. But it's also hypocritical when you yourself speak with an American accent and wear a Western suit and tie. Ah! Now, earlier on in the video, I mentioned the movie Mat Kilau, which is quite an ethno-nationalistic film, right? Which basically is supposed to be for basically inspiring a feeling of pride in being Malay, right? And you'll see sometimes the extreme ultra-nationalists in my country will say that, well, of course, you know, we're not necessarily being racist or bigoted or anything, but we're just trying to preserve the dignity of our race, right? But very soon you'll find that those people who say that we're trying to preserve the dignity of so-and-so race, whether it be the dignity of the Malay race, the dignity of the Chinese race, the dignity of the Indian race, these ultra ethno-nationalists, you'll find, have no room for people of their own race who don't happen to fit their mold, right? Pretty soon, if let's say you're a person who is an Asian person who for example cannot speak any Asian language, or who happens to have a more westernized outlook in life. I'm not westernized, yeah? Don't make that assumption just on superficial characteristics. The people calling me westernized are actually more westernized than I am. But if they happen to have a slightly more westernized outlook, then you'll see these very same race activists will turn. They will turn on those people of their own race and basically say that those people are race traitors. Those people are Talibarut, which basically means a race traitor, or basically a colonial stooge, basically. So you see, they're not pro their particular race even. It's not good to be pro any particular race. It's good to be pro human race, but it's not good, as I've said, to be pro one specific race, because by extension, you end up eventually becoming anti-other races, right? Like you can see just in Asia ZN identity, the not only anti-whiteness, but anti-blackness as well, right? I'm not excusing the bad behavior of some bad faith actors of the African American community, but let's not pretend that there isn't anti-blackness in these groups, right? But okay, still, the fact of the matter is that it's bad if you're a race activist because you end up becoming suspicious of other races. But in the end, you end up becoming suspicious of people from your race who don't fit your mold. Do you understand? And then you start pretty soon. You start the process of, well, separating wheat from chaff, so to speak. And pretty soon, you will start you'll start being suspicious of anyone in your race who happens to not fit your rigid mold. That's why if you'll notice, Douglas Kim, this fellow who's been attacking me nonstop, this men's rights activist Asian who's been attacking me nonstop, he has lost a shit ton of friends because anyone who doesn't fit his rigid mold on what a real Asian person is gets turned into an enemy. Not by, they don't want to be his enemies, but he turns them into enemies, right? Anyone who does not fit his intolerant, rigid mold. That's the whole point, you see? Because at the end of the day, when there's no other group when let's say you've got your group, okay, that's basically how fascism works. You've got your social group, you don't have friends from other groups. And then, as it turns out, you end up starting to suspect, you end up with this siege mentality that, oh, we must be wary of the traitors in our group. And we must always be aware of these imposters with Asian faces, those Asians who are not real Asians, but are white people in Asian skins. We must also be aware of those imposters, And I don't think that these Asian American extremists would shed many tears for me if any hate crime occurred to me, right? I doubt that they'd shed many tears for someone like me, you see. In fact, they may even wish it, right? Because there are some of them who even say they wish that boba Asians would experience some hate crimes in order to teach them a lesson, pretty much. And this is partly why I don't call myself an Asian activist anymore. Make no mistake, I'm still anti-racist, right? I will fight racism with every fiber of my being. But the fact of the matter is that, Asian activism is toxic. Asian American activism, I should say, has gotten toxic. It may have started out with good intentions, but very soon it started becoming more and more extreme, to the extent when I realized that even though they were happy for me to call out anti-Asian hate crimes in the West, they were happy for me to call out Western chauvinism, they were happy for me to promote Asian pride, they just turned on me, in a snap, just when I start calling out the dark side of Asian society, like how bananas or coconuts are being bullied in Asia. Those who can't speak their own Asian language are being bullied and ostracized, or anyone who doesn't fit the rigid collective mold of Asia also gets ostracized. When you bring up these things, they turn on you and call you self-hating, and basically, I have a feeling that many of these Asian activists would happily throw me under the bus and side with Asian extremists in Asia. They expect my full commitment, my full loyalty to their cause, but at the same time, they do not bother listening. They do not bother actually getting the point of view, or rather, they do not bother trying to understand the point of view of someone in Asia who happens to, be trying to improve Asian society. And it's extremely disingenuous of them to say that, I'm self-hating, I'm saying that all Asians are cruel, all Asians are nasty. That's not the case. But ultras, let's not kid ourselves. Ultras not only exist in Western or African society, there are ultras in Asian society as well. How much of that is the result of colonialism, race essentialism as a result of colonialism? I don't know. But as a matter of fact, this is an issue that's affecting Asians in Asia, right? And if you have nothing to contribute, if you have no way to help me, that's fine. But what I find bizarre is why these Americans are basically trying to sabotage me. When they live miles away in America, they don't have to deal with what bananas or coconuts in Asia have to deal with. The stigma and the bullying and the ostracization, they don't have to deal with that. Why are they trying to sabotage me when they live miles away in America and don't have to deal with that? I don't try to sabotage them when they deal with anti-Asian hate crimes or Western chauvinism, but it seems that they're not reciprocating. You see, they were happy to support me when I supported them, but they were not happy to support me basically they are not happy to support me. In fact, they go against me when I call out the aspects of Asian society that don't fit their perfect utopian narrative. And it's extremely childish to call someone a self-hater just because he's trying to make Asian society better, right? So it's often said that, Western leftists, the Baizuo, are apparently really chauvinistic, very bigoted, and basically don't respect the point of view of people of color, right? And that they apparently talk over people in Asia when people in Asia talk about their lived experiences, right? The Baizuo have a very bad reputation for this reason. Does that mean that every Western leftist is like that? No, absolutely not. Only the most regressive, bigoted Western leftists, right? With a Western chauvinist streak. But the fact of the matter is that even though these so-called Asian American activists who have been attacking me, and attacking Luna Oy as well, and attacking my friend Timmy Hayes, who's half white and half Asian. His father was an American soldier in Korea, right? They attacked Timmy Hayes as a Hapa sexpat, right? These very same people who attack us because we don't happen to fit their rigid mold of what a real Asian person is, these very same people are no different from the Baizuo because they themselves cannot respect the point of view, they cannot respect the perspective of an Asian person in Asia. If that Asian person in Asia doesn't happen to fit within their neat little box, right? Like, take Luna Oy, for example. They say that, because she's a WMAF, she's a white male Asian female, right? Any Asian woman with a white husband should be viewed with suspicion when it comes to anti-imperialism, or any Asian woman with a white boyfriend should be viewed with suspicion, right? You see what I mean? There's no evidence to suggest that Luna Oy's husband is a sexpat, right? Right? And second of all, this is an inconvenient fact I have to mention, but not every sexpat is white, quite literally, right? There are sexpats who come from more developed Asian countries like Japan and Korea, right? Who come to Southeast Asia and look down on Southeast Asians in the same way that whites look down on us, that white sexpats look down on us. But if I mention that inconvenient fact, I will also tick off these so-called Asian activists for breaking Asian solidarity in the face of Western imperialism. When Southeast Asians like Filipinos and Cambodians and so on and so forth talk about how they are treated in countries, in societies like Hong Kong, South Korea, and Singapore, right? When they bring up their experiences with colorism, their experiences with facing inter-Asian racism by East Asians, bam! These so-called Asian activists again attack them and try to silence them in the same way they try to silence me. Because if you attack a white man or a black man, that's fine in their view. But it's absolutely unacceptable to criticize any other Asian person, specifically East Asian person, right? You know what I mean? It's tough. Basically, it's tough getting along with these people because they themselves do not want to see your point of view. They do not want to see the point of view of anyone who doesn't happen to fit within their rigid mold. It's said that the Baizhuo, the white left, basically, although they may be, they may be personally atheist, they are culturally Christian, right? Because there's a strong tendency, or rather a heavy trend in the Baizhuos to romanticize poverty and weakness, right? That's the complaint that you hear all the time from these Asian activists. Maybe that's true. Maybe that's true, right? Because, they don't seem to... Okay, but at the same time, I could also say that many of these so-called Asian activists in America, these gatekeeping Asian activists who go around trying to police what a real Asian is and what a real Asian is not, they may be genetically Asian, but culturally, they are American. Yes, culturally, they're still unable to get rid of their rigid, black and white, westernized thinking and interpret things with nuance. So no, while I don't consider myself to be a race activist in the sense that, I'm not an Asian activist, because oftentimes racial activism soon spirals into extremism, right? I'm still anti-racist. I'm still vehemently opposed to racism with every fiber of my body, including racism not only by whites, but by other people of color towards other people of color, and even other people of color towards whites, right? Although that doesn't happen quite as often. It still happens, right? But anyway, still, I'm not convinced in this idea of solidarity on the basis of race. Yes, solidarity on the basis of shared experience is a possibility, but I don't think you'll disagree with me when I say that you have a lot more in common with a capital... Oh, let me rephrase that. You have more in common with a working class person from a different race than you do with a capitalist of your own race. Does that make sense? Yes, you have more in common with a working class person of a different race than you do with a capitalist of your own race. So racial solidarity is divisive, and basically it only creates divisions among the human race when we all have one common shared humanity, right? Thank you, and have a lovely day. Bangunlah rakyat yang tertindas, bangun rakyat yang diperas, nyalakan api perjuangan, menjulang kebenaran, hancurkan segala penindasan, ayo kita bangun, bangun. Dunia baru kita dirikan, pasti jadi kenyataan. Perjuangan penghabisan, bersatu kita lawan. Dan internasional pasti kan berjaya. Perjuangan penghabisan, bersatu kita lawan. Dan internasional pasti kan berjaya.